Okay, so today we're talking about rest. Rest is so important when it comes to being a effective Christian leader in this world. I mean, aside from Christianity, I mean, rest is something that is necessary for us as a human being. And I think a lot of times it gets pushed to the side just because of societal, the culture, because of what people expect from us, because of pressures that we put on ourselves that really aren't healthy. And so today we're going to be talking about why the principle of rest is so important. Now, what is rest? Rest essentially, because last week we talked about solitude, which sometimes can go hand in hand with rest, but rest in itself is the intentional time to fill up. Well, fill up what, right? Fill up your soul, fill yourself up, fill up your spirit, fill up your soul. Rest is an intentional time that we take in order to fill up. We get the idea and the principle of rest from the second chapter of Genesis, because when God was creating the earth, it says on the seventh day, God rested. That's where the Sabbath comes in. So you may have heard Sabbath before. It's a sacred day dedicated to resting. So basically, God created the world and universe in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh. And then he commanded people, hey, see what I have done, that I rested on the seventh, and now I command you to also take a Sabbath day and rest on that seventh day. So if God commanded us to do it, it's probably a good idea to really, look at that as a priority in our life. I think that God gave us rest for two reasons. I think there's two primary reasons that we should rest. Today's episode, I'm trying not to make it too long. The last episodes have been 20 and 30 minutes. And so I know that's not too long, but I want to, make sure that I get it a little bit shorter than that. So we're going to be going through today on two reasons that you need to rest. The first one is this, because we physically and we spiritually need it. Okay. Like, I don't know if you have noticed this, but that's why we sleep at night. Our body physically needs rest. We need to rest, but also we spiritually need rest, because what you produce in life only comes from what you have. You can only give as much as you have. And too many Christians today are running on empty. Their tank is on empty. They're all just trying to work hard, they're trying to do their best, they're trying to succeed, but in the process, they're not taking care of their own selves, they're not taking care of their soul, and what happens is they're just always drained. Have you ever seen that Christian, that person, that they're always tired? They're always frantic and hectic, and you look at your life and you're like, how do you live with so much stress? Let me tell you, God has not called us to live in a constant state of worry, fear, anxiousness. I think that everybody can agree with that. But guess what? God has also not called us to live in a constant state of weary and tiredness. God has called us to live with overflow. And how do we make overflow? Well, we have to eliminate the stupid culture that is the hustle culture in today's world. So don't hear me wrong here. I'm about hustle. I love hustling. I think it's a great principle to have, to work hard, right? To go after things that you want. However, hustle culture has turned into what we see today in today's world as no matter what, I'm going to work more and succeed, no matter the cost. No matter the cost, I'm going to put way more hours in. No matter the cost, I'm going to work hard so I can see this net result. Well, the problem with that is we begin to prioritize success over health. And God has never called us to do that. So the one thing that we have to eliminate, first of all, is this idea of hustle culture. In Matthew chapter 16, it says, so what if I gain the whole world if I forfeit my soul? Too many of us are forfeiting our soul in today's world because we're trying to attain something that we feel like God honors in our lives in terms of hey, I'm working for God, I'm producing for God, especially in ministry, especially in the church. Yeah, I'm doing this for God. All the while we're neglecting ourselves. And because we neglect ourselves, everything else is a rippling effect of our relationships, of our family life. Honestly, the hard truth is there's a lot of people in this world. There's a lot of, I'm speaking specifically for men, but there's a lot of men that work for their family. They're like, no, this is for my family. This is for my family. When all the while they're just neglecting their family. And so rest is something that protects us from something called burnout. I personally, honestly, if you're a Christian, you've probably heard the term burnout. Like they just got burnt out in ministry. They just got burnt out, in their job, whatever, burnout. I don't really like the term burnout to be honest. But what burnout really is there's two ways that you burn out in this life. Number one, you're doing what you're not supposed to be doing. Because if you're doing what you're not supposed to be doing, you're not going to have fun or find fulfillment in it. And so, of course, you're going to get burnt out in it. The number two is we don't prioritize what we should prioritize, which is rest. If you're not resting, okay, listen to this. If you are not taking the time to rest properly in your life, even though you're doing what God has called you to do, maybe vocationally, you will find yourself hurting and you will find yourself unfulfilled and you will find yourself in a place of hurt and anguish eventually down the road. There will not be longevity. God calls us to do what he has called us to do for a long time. And when we have this idea of hustle culture over our personal health, over rest, over Sabbath, what happens is even if we're doing the right thing, we're not going to be able to be doing it for a long time. Okay, so hustle culture is a poison. It's a small poison that we don't see and we don't feel because every day we take deposits without withdrawing. And then eventually all of a sudden we get to a place where something blows up or we have a huge crisis or a meltdown or something will happen and our mental health isn't what we want it to be. And we think, how the heck did I get here? Well, it's because you didn't prioritize rest the whole time. And so what happens is we fall into that trap. If the devil can't slow you down, he'll speed you up. If the devil can't slow you down, he'll speed you up. And so we have to be careful that we're not being sped up too much to where we aren't taking rest to re-energize ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally. We need rest because rest creates margin and margin creates levity. If you want levity in your life, if you don't want to always be waking up in the morning, being stressed out, if you don't always want to be feeling hectic and out of time, then if you want levity, then you need margin. Well, if you need margin, you need rest. Okay, so that's why we prioritize rest. Second reason we prioritize rest is this. I don't think this is often talked about or thought about, but rest also is a principle that is trust. Now you might be saying, okay, Spencer, how does rest equal trust? That doesn't make any sense. Well, rest is trusting God that he is going to be who he said he is going to be. Now, we have to take this all the way back to the Old Testament. Okay, let's take it all the way back to the principle of the Sabbath day. So they did Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. So pretty much all of Saturday, that would be their Sabbath. And they weren't allowed to work. They weren't allowed to let anybody in their family work. They weren't allowed to let any of their animals do any of their work. It was just a day of rest. Part of that is we need rest. Part of that is if you think about, how they worked back in the Old Testament, that was their entire livelihood. That was their life. That was their survival. Okay? Because I get it. We get Taco Bell and we get McDonald's and, we get the grocery store in today's world. Back then, their crops and their farming was their survival. Like they would die if they didn't take care of it. So this was also an act of trust to say, God, I am not going to work for a full 24 hours, 1/7 of the week, because I recognize that as much as work as I can do for myself, I know that you are my provider. I know that you are the ultimate one that keeps me fed, that keeps me going, that helps these crops, that gives me livelihood. So because of that, my Sabbath is my trust to say, Lord, I know that you are faithful. I know that you are for me. So this is an act of trust. Because you betcha that they were tempted probably to work because it's like, hey, I could get a lot done. You ever been in that place where it's like, I could rest, but I could get so much done right now. Well, we have to be able to trust God that he is working on the back end for us. He is working behind the scenes, moving puzzle pieces, moving the chess pieces so that as we work and as we rest, he is aligning things that we can walk further and climb higher and go farther than we ever could have by ourselves. So that is a principle of rest. It's trust. Trust God. I know that some of you, sometimes I get in this mode where it's like, I don't want to rest because I feel like I'm being so unproductive. Yeah, that's the point, is to be unproductive and know that, wow, things can still advance in my life even when I'm unproductive. That's pretty crazy, but that means that obviously I'm not the one that's in control. So that is the principle of rest. Galatians 5 is the fruits of the Spirit. And I love this because sometimes we walk and we act so much in terms of how can I accomplish more? How can I do more? God, how can I do so much more for you? When God doesn't call us to do more out of success, he calls us to walk in the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. How do we walk in those things? Well, we can't walk in those things if we're always stressed out and we have no margin. We can only walk in the fruits of the Spirit and walk by it when we're at a place where our soul is healthy and we are rested. So those are the two principles of rest. You need it if you want to last in this life, okay? You need it if you want health, and you also need it as a principle of trusting God and increasing your faith to know that God is who he says he is. So where do you start? What's the practical takeaways from this episode? Number one, if you don't have an intentional time of rest, you need it ASAP Rocky. So for me, Adrienne, my wife, she works at the church that we go to, and her off days are Mondays. And so I take my off days on Mondays, and Mondays are our rest days. We don't do anything on a Monday that doesn't give us rest. We don't work. We don't talk about things that are stressful. We only do things that build our rest, that we love doing. Okay, so if you don't have margin, I know that there's circumstances out there, I know, where you don't have a day out of the week for it. That's totally fine. The principle or the commandment of one day a week because of the Old Testament, Jesus healed on the Sabbath in the New Testament, and the Pharisees were super mad at him. They're like, why are you healing on the day that is supposed to be rest? And Jesus basically was like, bro, I am rest. Like, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. And so in the idea of the commandment, Jesus fulfilled that day as our rest. So Jesus is our rest. However, a principle can be that you have designated times throughout the week. You need designated times. I'll say this time and time and time and time again. Margin is not found, margin is created. So we need to be intentional with creating rest. So if you are in a season where you're like, hey, I cannot take a full day off, take a half day. Find time throughout your day and really be intentional with it. Because if we're not resting, we're not doing our very best to steward the calling that God has for our life. And once you find a time, once you start somewhere, only do what you love. Only do what fills you up. Don't do what you think should fill you up, right? It's okay to, on your Sabbath, be like, okay, I don't feel like reading 15 chapters of the Bible. That's totally fine. Like, I believe in getting in God's word, and I believe in obviously spending time with the Lord on your Sabbath, but don't feel like you have to be some overly righteous person where you spend the 3 hours on your Sabbath praying and then 4 hours in the word. Like me and Adrian's Sabbath, what it usually looks like is we'll wake up whenever we want to wake up. I can sleep in pretty late, honestly. So we'll sleep in. We'll have breakfast together. We'll do our devos together. We'll go to a coffee shop. We'll hang out. Maybe we'll go hang out with some friends. Maybe we'll see a movie, but it's so chill. And that's because that's what gives us rest, is really doing nothing. So find a day, find a time, start somewhere, write down a list of what you love to do and only do those things. And I promise you, you'll start to find more margin in your life. You'll start to have more patience for people in your life. You'll start to have more vision for your life. You'll start to have more purpose for your life, because as you build your rest, you will build your capacity. You will build and then you will start integrating more of the fruits of the Spirit in your life. You'll find more joy in your life. You'll find more peace. You'll find more rest. You'll find more kindness. You'll find more goodness. You'll find more faithfulness. There are so many amazing things that come from rest. Shocker, because God called us to rest. Okay. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was actually, it was still like, it was still longer than I thought it was going to be, but, take time for yourself to rest. Rest is a principle that you need if you want to be effective in this world for God. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, hit that 5 stars and leave something that you love about the episode, about the podcast. Reach out to me on Instagram, at Spencer Knock. Go follow me on Instagram. I post more on there, and I would love to talk with you guys. And so you can DM me if you are wanting to have a conversation, if you want to talk about rest and what it looks like, if you have any questions. So besides that, make sure that you guys are pumping out this podcast. It's continuing to grow, and I'm very thankful for each and every one of you. Besides that, have a great week, and I'll see you next time on The Future Is Now.